gotta push
Well,
okay. All right.
welcome, Mr. J. So happy to have you here.
What's up?
What's up? So you're
Mhm.
up, and going to show you a picture and also give you a quote, and then just have whatever comes up for you to share, and
All
just
right.
share where you are hailing from, what state.
I am in California,
Okay.
in Alameda, California,
Okay.
not too far from the beach.
Great, great. Okay, so the quote, Jay,
Hmm.
I'd love to hear your thoughts about is that what sons hear and feel
Hmm.
about men and maleness from their mother can make them into the man they become. So I'll repeat that.
Yeah, say that one more time.
I will. Um, what sons hear and feel from their mothers
Mhm.
about men and maleness can make them into the man they become.
Wow.
So I want to show you a little cartoon that when I saw it broke my heart and actually stimulated the beginning of this my coaching relationship with mothers of sons. You ready to see it?
Well, yeah, but real quick, I mean,
Hey,
are you want this to be like completely candid, right? Like I can
Candid.
say whatever, whenever, whatever, right?
Yeah. Once I show you this visual, then you've got the floor. And the only thing really that I feel is important for this, it's non-judgmental. It's
Hmm.
just your experience of being a son. Okay, you ready
Okay.
for the
Yeah, let's
visual?
go. Let's do it.
Here's the visual: the little boy standing in front of his mother, and he's got donkey ears and a donkey tail.
Hmm.
And below it, it says, "Your father was a jackass." Okay, so along with the quote, your thoughts.
Quote with the quote and the picture together. Okay, here we go. Just any thoughts, right? So, uh, very true. So, there's no time limit on what I can say, right? I can just go and then, okay. So I'm gonna give you some context just on my thought process a little bit, and where I've come or how like where I come from and where I am now, right? Because I'm 37. You met me when I was 22, right? So the 22-year-old me is a little bit different than the 37-year-old me, and way different than the 5-year-old me, right? So like, the maturation over time has really shaped the person I am today. And I've collected information along the way, right? Now, I'm gonna get back to your quote, but let me just kind of give you a little bit of context on where I am today as a 37-year-old man. And my mom was at the wedding, and that was beautiful and all that good stuff. But so one thing that my one of my mentors, so I have a spiritual mentor. His name is Jesse Lee Peterson, and he really helped me with a lot of things that I was dealing with because one thing that he would emphasize is the type of relationships that a man will have with like a significant other or an intimate relationship. A lot of it comes from what we witnessed as children with our parents, right? And then also, making sure that, well, basically, what one thing that he emphasizes is be aware of the relationships that I witnessed growing up, and then that is usually, history repeats itself, right? And so if I have to always be aware of like the way I treat my spouse is a lot has to do with what I saw growing up, right? So just a side note on that. Now, as far as now to give some history, because it really to really give you how what I feel about those quotes in that picture, I have to give a little bit of history. So, my parents, you know, they got together, I think their late 20s, early 30s. I think I was born when they were like in their early 30s. And there was, my dad was a very strong individual. She has a very strong personality. Where my mom, she's a sweet lady. She has a strong personality too, but she's not as loud and vocal as like my dad is, right? And so they started having some trouble. I would say I was about 10 years old. That's when I started noticing that there was some conflict there, right? And I would say between 10 and 18, um, there were some moments based on that picture you just showed. There were some moments where, my mom was like, there was things about my dad that she wasn't, clicking with, right? And so, I would hear the like just like that picture says, right? I would hear
Mhm.
these things about my dad. And, at some point, you're like, well, as a child, you almost take sides. And I kind of, for a moment there, for a moment there, I took my dad's side.
Mhm.
But then as little more context, when I was 15, I don't even know if you know this, Terry. When I was, oh man, and this is going to be public, huh? I don't care. Let's go for it. Because in order for us to heal, right? If we really truly heal, we should be able to talk about things, right? So, just to give you some context, I don't know if this is where you want the direction of the conversation to go, and I'm getting really personal here. But basically, I was a ranked basketball player. um, I was doing some amazing things in the world of basketball. And just to let you know, when I was 15 years old, and anyone watching this, or you can technically just Google Juwan Rubin, and you can read all the stories and articles that happened around this. But basically, I was my dad and the coach at that time had some issues, right? Because of my brother. My brother was 4 years older than me, so he had some issues with my brother. So then when I got there, it was like the issues were already there, and they had some issues, whatever. So I was supposed to play. Well, I was trying out for the varsity basketball team. He ended up telling me to go to the JV team. I went and told my dad. My dad got really upset and told me just don't even go to the tryout at all. 3 weeks later, all of a sudden, there's this thing in the news about my dad suing the school for the coach making that decision, right? Now that was a really huge issue, because what ended up happening from that point on is that a lot of basketball coaches, they didn't want to deal with me because they didn't want to deal with my dad, right?
Mm.
And so that was the moment where I realized, oh snap, I took the wrong side. I should have been taking my mom's side, because my mom, I think, was onto something about the way that my dad was. Um, Now, based on that, on the quote and on that picture, my mom was always very, very careful about, you know, how she talked about my dad in front of us. But so it wasn't really for me, it wasn't that my mom kind of was saying all these things about my dad and then I saw it in myself. Oh, maybe it was. Yeah. So I now, now as a 37-year-old man, and even, all throughout my 20s, I always had to, this is one thing my mentor is teaching me. I always had to take a beat, right? Whenever I make a decision, whenever I say something, whenever I, have, interpersonal communication with like my spouse, I always have to think, like when I say something or do something, like where did I get that from? And then when I question that, where did I get that from? If the answer is, oh, my dad was this way and he did the same thing and he would say something like this in this situation, I'd have to catch myself and say to myself, is that something that I liked about my dad, or was it something I did not like about my dad?
Mm.
If it's something I didn't like, then that's something I needed to correct, right? And that's something that I had to do internally. My mom is the cool thing about my mom that I can't say for all moms out there, but for my mom, because she her field was in psychotherapy, right? So she was a therapist or behavioral therapist at Kaiser for over 30 years. So she had the skill set to make sure that no matter what happened, no matter what relationship I had with my dad, no matter what relationship she had with my dad, she was always kind of just there to listen, to try to understand. But and unfortunately, in some ways, she was an enabler for me and my siblings because to this day, even with my siblings, she she has a level of empathy for us because she knows what the influence that our dad had on us and how a lot of those influences were not positive, right? And so she's been very good about that as far as like understanding, but then also it's a little bit of an enabler, right? Because she allows us to kind of get away with things because she's always like, well, I know that it was just my dad. And a little bit more context, my mom, she was working, um her job was like 45 minutes to an hour away. So my dad, he worked close by, right? So I saw my dad a lot more than I saw my
Mm.
mom, actually. So now at that time it was kind of like I was on my dad's side mostly because I was around him more. And so my mom really missed out on really raising us. So my dad raised us more than my mom did. So I think to this day right now, I think she's still trying to rekindle that relationship that she didn't really have growing up. And then now that my dad has passed, he passed away almost 3 years ago. She's really trying to like understand her kids a lot better than she wasn't able to do before.
Mm.
So anyway, I say all that because I want to give at least some context on my thoughts on this quote. I believe it's 100% true that whatever a mother would say about her men in general, but for sure the father, yeah, we do hold on to those things. And in some instances, like my mentor says, in some instances you can turn the children away from the father based on some of the things that you might say about the father. I was lucky enough to where my mom always encouraged me to have a relationship with him. Even though she knew how he was, she never really she always said certain things, but I never internalized it. I was always had the wisdom enough to say, okay, my dad is this way, my mom feels this way about my dad, and I know that his DNA is inside of me. And plus, since I grew up around him more, there's a certain traits that I exude that came from him. And I'm like I said, I have the wisdom to be able to always take a beat and say, okay, where did I get this from? Why is it from my dad? If did I like that about my dad? If the answer is no, then I need to correct that. And that's something that I'm dealing with to this day right now, actually.
Okay.
That was a lot. That's a
That's
mouthful.
fantastic. Wow. Thank you for that. Yes. So,
Yeah.
um, do you remember, Jay, and we'll wrap up soon, that feeling like as a young boy that you had, um, deciding which side to go and the listening to this one and what your mom would feel about a man and you're growing up to be a man and what that would mean to you? Like, do you have any recollection of those feelings?
Yeah, I mean, I think middle school is like the most formative years, right? So I would say 10 to maybe 14, 15. They say that that's the personality you build between the ages of 10 and 14 usually stick with you
Mm.
throughout your life, unless you make some corrections. So yeah, right between 10 and 14, 15, I was choosing the side of my dad because it was just like, well, hey mom, what do you know? You're not a man. I'm a man, or I'm becoming a man, so I need to I can't learn from you how to be a man,
You
you
remember
know?
being aware of that.
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty
Okay.
astute at a pretty
Okay.
young age. Yeah, I read a lot, and I had a level of understanding, but it wasn't until, that thing that happened with the lawsuit and everything when I was 15, that's when I kind of was like, okay, maybe my mom is right in some instances, but the thing is still that, I it's so funny. Like when I was 18, I left. Like because I couldn't deal with being around my dad anymore, right? At that point. So 18, I left. And from that point on, I was always just kind of looking for that kind of like father figure or someone to
Mhm.
model my life after as a man because I hate to say it, and I've wrote short stories and poems on this, and I don't have them anymore, but I think my mom does. And I remember one of the poems I wrote, I literally said, "My dad is not a man." Like I literally said that, and so I think that's how now, a little, I have a better perspective on things. But at that time, at 18, 19 years old, I was like, no, he's not a man. I'm not going to model my life after him because I don't believe that the way that he conducts himself in the world is the way that I want to conduct myself in the world. So let me find, someone out that can, teach me some things that on how to be a man and what manhood is. And really, it wasn't up until recently my mentor Jesse Lee Peterson, who's kind of that's what he teaches. He teaches manhood, and so that really helped me out on how to be a man. But to answer your question, yeah, I remember how it felt. It was it was one of those. It was a conflict, right? Because I really loved my dad, and I wanted to, you know, uh, be around him and learn from him at the time. But then also I knew my mom, she was just a really strong person and like she always had good insight. But yeah, like I said, like, at some point I love my mom to death, but my mom can only do so much as far as teaching me how to be a man, right? And I think that's one thing that's missing in our society today is
Mm.
not enough men understand manhood. And I think to a certain point, even manhood is one of those things where it's not really even talked about anymore. I mean, we're to the point where what is a man, right? Like now we're asking even what that question is. Can a man, like,
Yes.
can you turn into
Yes.
a man if you're born
Yes.
a female? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yes.
so a
Yes.
lot of those, in society, we're kind of figuring it out too. So I think there's I don't want to go so far as say there's a attack on manhood. I've heard people say that, but I would say that young men, it's not talked about, and it's not cool to talk about manhood anymore. And I think we need to bring that back 100%. That's one thing that I try to do and try to help my mentees. Now I'm a mentor to
Of
people,
course you
so I
are.
try to so I try to help them understand. Hey, this is manhood.
Yes.
Manhood is really about protecting yourself, protecting your family, being a provider, but also just loving truth with all your heart and
Mm.
yeah, and helping the next generation as much as possible.
Thank you, Jay. This is brilliant.
Whew.
I appreciate your time, your
We're shutting
vulnerability.
down already.
We're shutting down. That was
Oh
that I can
man.
hardly take. It's so big. Thank you so much, Jay. I'm gonna just end this now and with much love.
Let me end with this though, okay?
Yes.
the, in the sentiment of what you're doing and what you got going on. I love my mom to death. Okay, um, uh, she's one person that I would say honestly, out of all the people in my life, she's the one person that knows everything about me. Right. I think, yeah, I would say she's the one person who knows everything. Cause like I know a lot of people, I'm pretty candid with a lot of people, but I don't tell people everything. But my mom, she knows everything. So she's, man, and, it's hard to say that, but she's one of the only people that I can go to when things are a little tough. She gives me good insight. And like I said, the good thing about her, she actually studied psychotherapy. So it's like she brings those tools with her as well. So she's amazing. She is the backbone. My dad passed away. I mean, my fiance, oh, my wife now, she used to always, she always would ask me like, what would you do if your mom passed? Honestly, I don't know, like it's gonna be, I know we have a finite amount of time on this earth, and I know, hopefully, the parents always say they would like to pass away before their kids. So that's kind of, I guess, the hope. And so I know one day either I'm going to pass away, she's going to pass away. If I pass away first, maybe that'll be better. No, I'm kidding. But like, I know one day it might happen where she does pass away, and the imprint she put on my life and others'
Mm.
lives have been phenomenal, and love her to death. And we have a great relationship. And I think the mother son relationship is really, really powerful. And I think every young man also does need some way to know what it means to be a man. And I think that's something that's missing in our society right now.
Thank you so much, Jay. Thank you.
Good stuff. Woo. So this is going public.